When being nice becomes self-sacrifice, you reach a point where your kindness no longer feels like a strength, but instead feels like a burden. Because somewhere along the way you started putting everyone else first and yourself last. You began saying yes when you wanted to say no. You began helping when you were already exhausted. You began giving more than you had to give. And slowly your own needs started to fade into the background. At first, it may have felt good to be needed to be. The one people could rely on, the one who never said no, the one who always showed up. But over time, that constant giving without receiving begins to take a toll. You start to feel drained. You start to feel overlooked, and you start to feel like your own voice no longer matters. And that is where the shift begins. Because true kindness does not require you to lose yourself. True kindness does not mean sacrificing your peace, your energy, or your well-being just to keep others comfortable. There comes a moment when you realize that always being nice is not the same as being respected, and that constantly giving without boundaries is not the same as being valued. Self-sacrifice disguised as kindness can quietly take away your identity, your strength, and your sense of self. And that is when you begin to understand that you deserve more than just being the person who gives. You deserve to be the person who also receives, who is also respected, and who also protects their own peace. When kindness turns into losing yourself, you reach a point where what once felt like a strength begins to drain you, because you started out wanting to be good to people, to show compassion, to help where you could. But somewhere along the line, that kindness stopped being balanced and started becoming sacrifice. You gave your time, you gave your energy, you gave your attention, and little by little you began to give parts of yourself away until there was not much left for you. That is how it happens, quietly, without notice, without warning. You say yes when you want to say no. You show up when you are exhausted. You listen when you have nothing left to give, and you keep going. Because you don't want to disappoint anyone. But in the process, you begin to disappear. Your voice gets quieter, your needs get smaller, your boundaries begin to fade. And before you know it, your life is no longer centered around your own well-being. It is centered around keeping others comfortable. And that is where the problem begins, because kindness without boundaries turns into self-neglect. You cannot pour from an empty place, and yet you keep trying to give even when you are running on nothing. You tell yourself it is the right thing to do, that this is what a good person does, but you forget that being a good person also means being good to yourself. There is a difference between kindness and self-sacrifice. Kindness oft uplifts both you and others. Self-sacrifice drains you while benefiting others. And if you are not careful, you can lose yourself trying to be everything for everyone else. You start to measure your worth by how much you give, how available you are, how much you can handle, but that is not where your worth comes from. Your worth is not defined by your ability to sacrifice your peace. Your worth is defined by who you are when you stand in your truth. When kindness turns into losing yourself, you begin to feel it in quiet ways. You feel tired even when you have done nothing physical. You feel emotionally drained. You feel unseen, unappreciated, and sometimes even invisible. And those feelings are not random. They are signals. They are telling you that something is out of balance, that you are giving too much and receiving too little. But the hardest part is acknowledging it, because admitting that you have been neglecting yourself feels uncomfortable. You may have been taught that putting others first is the right thing to do, but there is a difference between caring for others and abandoning yourself. You are not meant to disappear in the process of being kind. You are meant to stand strong while still being kind. That is real strength, because it takes strength to say no. It takes strength to step back. It takes strength to protect your energy when everything in you wants to keep giving. And that is where the shift begins, when you start choosing yourself without losing your kindness, when you start setting boundaries without feeling guilty, when you start understanding that your needs matter just as much as anyone else's. You begin to reclaim yourself. You begin to rebuild the parts of you that were neglected, you begin to restore your energy, your confidence, and your sense of identity. Kindness does not have to come at the cost of your well-being. You can be kind and still be firm. You can care for others and still protect yourself. You can give without losing who you are. But that requires awareness, it requires honesty, and it requires the courage to change. Because if you continue down the path of losing yourself in the name of kindness, you will eventually wake up and not recognize the person you have become, and that is not the life you were meant to live. You were meant to be whole, you were meant to be strong, you were meant to be strong, you were meant to give from a place of fullness, not from a place of depletion. So, when you feel yourself slipping into that pattern, pause and ask yourself, am I giving from a place of strength, or am I giving at the cost of myself? Because that question alone can change the direction of your life, and when you choose to honor yourself while still being kind, you step into a level of balance that allows you to give without losing yourself, and that is where true strength begins. The cost of always putting others first is something most people don't see until they have already paid for it. Because it doesn't happen all at once, it happens slowly, quietly, invisibly, until one day you realize you have given so much of yourself that there is little left for you. At first it feels natural, it feels rewarding, it feels like the right thing to do, to be the person everyone can rely on, to show up, to help, to support, to sacrifice your own comfort for theirs. And there is honor in that. There is value in being dependable, in being generous, in being willing to give. But when giving becomes the default, when putting others first becomes a habit without balance, without boundaries, that is when the cost begins to accumulate. You start to feel exhaustion in your body before your mind even catches up. You start to feel resentment bubbling under the surface, but you push it aside because it is easier to continue giving than to face the discomfort of stopping. Your relationships begin to feel one-sided. You notice that the appreciation is minimal, the acknowledgement is rare, the recognition is almost non-existent. And yet you continue because you have conditioned yourself to put everyone else before yourself. Over time, that pattern erodes your energy, your confidence, and your self-respect, because when you consistently sacrifice your needs, you teach people that your needs are optional, that your time is disposable, that your well-being is negotiable, and eventually it shows up in subtle ways in your health, your emotional state, your motivation, and your sense of purpose. You begin to feel depleted, even in moments that should bring you joy, because the constant giving has left little room for replenishment, little room for reflection, little room for your own growth. The cost is not just physical or emotional, it is spiritual, because when you consistently put others first without regard for yourself, you lose touch with who you are, what you value, and what you need to thrive. You begin to live your life for everyone else's expectations instead of your own aspirations, and slowly your identity becomes wrapped up in the needs and desires of others, and that is a heavy burden to carry, because no matter how much you give, there will always be more that someone else needs, more that the world demands, more that others expect. And if you have no boundaries to protect yourself, you will continue giving until there is nothing left to give. The cost also shows up in your relationships, because when people get used to taking without giving back, they start to assume that you will always be there to accommodate them, that you will always put their needs before your own. And if you do not consciously choose otherwise, you begin to attract relationships that drain you rather than nurture you, because you have modeled the behavior that your time, your energy, and your well-being are secondary. Putting others first is not inherently wrong, but putting them first at the expense of yourself is unsustainable. It is damaging, it is costly, because the person who always sacrifices eventually faces burnout, disappointment, and a sense of invisibility, and that is not the life you were meant to live. You were meant to live. You were meant to give and receive. You were meant to show up for others without losing yourself. You were meant to care without abandoning your own needs. Recognizing the cost is the first step to change. It requires honesty to admit that putting yourself first is not selfish. It requires courage to start saying no. It requires discipline to maintain boundaries consistently, even when others push back. Because the world will resist the change at first, people will challenge you, they will test you, they will see if you really mean it, if you really value yourself, if you really understand your own worth. And standing firm is difficult at first, but over time, you begin to notice the benefits. Your energy begins to recover, your confidence returns, your sense of purpose strengthens, your relationships improve. Because now you are attracting people who respect your boundaries, who value your time, who honor your needs. The cost of always putting others first is not just a personal expense. It is a life lesson about balance, about respect, about self-worth. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot serve effectively when your own needs are neglected, and you cannot live fully if your life revolves entirely around accommodating others. So the lesson is clear. Give generously, but give wisely. Help willingly, but do not neglect yourself. Support others, but maintain your boundaries. Prioritize your own well-being as much as you prioritize the needs of those around you. Because when you do that, you do not just avoid the cost, you begin to create a life that is sustainable, rewarding, and full of mutual respect and appreciation. And that is how you live fully and freely without losing yourself in the process. Being nice should not mean neglecting yourself, because true kindness is never built on self-destruction. It is built on balanced strength and awareness of your own worth. Too often people confuse being nice with being available for everyone at all times, without limits, without boundaries, without regard for their own well-being, and in doing so, they slowly begin to erase themselves. You start by helping here and there. You start by saying yes to things you don't really want to do. You start by putting others first because it feels right. It feels noble. It feels like the kind of person you are supposed to be. But over time, that pattern can turn into something heavier. You begin to feel tired, not just physically, but emotionally. You begin to feel drained in a way that sleep cannot fix, because the real exhaustion comes from constantly giving without receiving, constantly showing up without being replenished. And that is where the danger lies, because when being nice turns into neglecting yourself, you start to lose sight of your own needs, your own desires, your own voice. You begin to live your life responding to the expectations of others instead of honoring your own direction. You become so focused on being there for everyone else that you forget to be there for yourself. And that kind of living is not sustainable. You are not meant to carry everyone else's weight while ignoring your own. Not meant to sacrifice your peace just to avoid disappointing someone. You're not meant to give endlessly while running on empty. Being nice should come from a place of strength, not from a place of obligation. It should come from a place where you choose to give, because you are full, not because you feel pressured to give even when you are depleted. There is a difference between genuine kindness and self-neglect. Genuine kindness lifts both you and others. It allows you to give without losing yourself. It allows you to help without harming your own well-being. Self-neglect, disguised as kindness, drains you, it weakens you, and over time it can take away your sense of identity. And when you begin to lose yourself in the process of being nice, that is when you need to stop and reassess. You need to ask yourself if the way you are living is sustainable. If the way you are giving is healthy, if the way you are showing up is honoring who you are, because your life matters just as much as the lives you are trying to support. Your needs matter just as much as the needs of others. Your peace, your time, your energy, they all have value. And if you continuously give them away without boundaries, you will eventually find yourself in a place where you have nothing left to give, and that place is not a place of strength. It is a place of exhaustion and imbalance. Being nice does not require you to abandon yourself. It does not require you to say yes when you need to say no. It does not require you to overextend yourself beyond your limits. It requires awareness. It requires discipline. It requires the courage to protect your own well-being while still showing compassion. When you begin to understand that you can be kind and still set boundaries, you start to reclaim your power. You begin to realize that saying no is not unkind. It is necessary. You begin to understand that stepping back is not selfish. It is essential for your growth. You begin to see that protecting your energy is not a weakness. It is a strength, and that is when your kindness becomes truly powerful. Because now it is rooted in stability, not in sacrifice. Now it is guided by balance, not by pressure. Now it reflects a person who knows their worth and respects it. And when you live like that, people begin to see it. They begin to respect your boundaries. They begin to value your time. They begin to understand that your kindness is not something to be taken for granted, because you have shown them through your actions that you respect yourself enough not to neglect your own needs. That is the kind of life that builds long-term respect and inner peace. That is the kind of life that allows you to give without losing yourself. So continue to be kind, continue to care, continue to care. Continue to care. Show compassion, but never at the cost of your own well-being. Because the moment you start neglecting yourself in the name of being nice, you are no longer living in alignment with your true strength. And the goal is not just to be nice. The goal is to be whole. The goal is to be strong. The goal is to be someone who can give freely while still standing firmly in their own worth. And when you achieve that balance, you will understand that real kindness never requires you to disappear. It requires you to rise fully as yourself and stay true to who you are without compromise. Recognizing when giving becomes draining is one of the most important turning points in your life, because it separates true strength from quiet exhaustion. You start off with a good heart, willing to help, willing to give, willing to show up for people who need you, and there is nothing wrong with that. That is a reflection of character. That is a reflection of who you are at your core. But over time, if you are not careful, that same giving can begin to take more from you than it gives back. You start noticing the signs in subtle ways. You feel tired even after resting. You feel mentally overloaded, even when nothing major has happened. You feel emotionally stretched thin, like you are constantly pouring out energy without having time to refill, and yet you keep going. You keep saying yes. You keep showing up. You keep putting others first, because that is what you have always done. But somewhere deep inside, something begins to shift. You start to feel a quiet resistance, a voice inside telling you that something is not right, that something needs to change, that you are giving too much and receiving too little. That is the moment you need to pay attention. Because recognizing when giving becomes draining is not a weakness, it is wisdom. It is awareness. It is self-respect. There is a difference between giving from fullness and giving from depletion. When you give from fullness, you feel energized even after helping others. You feel aligned with your purpose. You feel strong in your ability to make a difference. But when you give from depletion, you feel empty. You feel exhausted. You feel like you are running on fumes. And if you continue down that path without recognizing it, you will eventually burn out. You will lose your motivation. You will lose your clarity. You may even begin to lose your sense of self, because giving without limits, without boundaries, without awareness leads to imbalance, and imbalance leads to exhaustion, and exhaustion leads to resentment, and resentment leads to disconnection from the very people you were trying to help. So the key is awareness. You have to become aware of your limits, aware of your energy, aware of your emotional state. You have to check in with yourself regularly and ask, am I giving from a place of strength or from a place of obligation? Am I helping because I want to, or because I feel like I have to? Am I honoring my own needs, or am I ignoring them? These questions matter because they help you stay aligned with yourself. They help you maintain balance. They help you avoid the silent trap of overgiving, and once you begin to recognize the signs, you also begin to take control. You start setting limits, you start protecting your time, you start saying no when necessary, not out of selfishness, but out of necessity, because you understand that your well-being matters, that your energy is valuable, that your peace is worth protecting, and that if you do not protect it, no one else will, recognizing when giving becomes draining. Also changes the way you see your relationships. You begin to notice who respects your energy and who only takes from it. You begin to see who values your presence and who expects your availability without appreciation. And that awareness allows you to make better decisions. It allows you to invest your energy where it is respected. It allows you to step back from situations that drain you. And that is not weakness. That is strength. Because strength is not just about how much you can give. Strength is also about knowing wait in to stop giving. Strength is about balance. Strength is about discipline. Strength is about understanding that you cannot pour endlessly without refilling. So you learn to step back, you learn to breathe, you learn to rest, you learn to recharge, and in doing so, you do not lose your ability to give. You strengthen it, because now when you give, it comes from a place of fullness, not emptiness, and that changes everything. Your relationships become healthier, your mind becomes clearer, your energy becomes more stable, and most importantly, you begin to feel like yourself again, recognizing when giving becomes draining is not about stopping your kindness. It is about refining it. It is about directing it wisely. It is about making sure that your giving does not come at the cost of your own well-being, because you cannot be strong for others if you are weak within yourself. You cannot support others if you are constantly depleted. You cannot pour into others if your own cup is empty. So honor yourself, respect your limits, protect your energy, and give from a place that strengthens both you and the people you care about. That is how you stay powerful, that is how you stay balanced, and that is how you build a life that is both meaningful and sustainable, without losing yourself in the process. Choosing yourself without losing your kindness is one of the highest forms of strength you can develop in life, because it requires you to stand firm in who you are while still keeping your heart open to others. For a long time you may have been taught that choosing yourself means being selfish, that putting your needs first means you are less caring, less giving, less compassionate. But that is not the truth. Choosing yourself is not about turning your back on others. It is about refusing to abandon yourself. It is about understanding that your life matters just as much as anyone else's. Your time matters. Your energy matters. Your peace matters. And when you begin to honor that truth, you step into a new level of awareness. You begin to realize that you can be kind without being taken advantage of. You can be generous without being depleted. You can care for others without neglecting yourself. And that is where real balance begins. Choosing yourself means learning to say no when necessary, not out of anger, not out of frustration, but out of respect for your own limits. It means recognizing when you are stretched too thin and having the courage to step back before you break. It means understanding that you are not responsible for carrying every burden or fixing every problem. You can support, you can encourage, you can stand beside people. But you do not have to lose yourself in the process, because once you lose yourself, you have nothing left to give. Kindness that comes from a depleted place is not sustainable. It leads to exhaustion. It leads to resentment. It leads to burnout. But kindness that comes from a place of strength, that is grounded in self-respect, that is protected by boundaries, that kind of kindness is powerful. That kind of kindness lasts. When you choose yourself, you begin to set boundaries that protect your well-being. And those boundaries do not make you less kind, they make you more grounded. They give your Kindness structures, they give your life balance. They give you the ability to give without overextending yourself. And that changes everything. Because now your giving is intentional. It is not forced. It is not driven by guilt. It is not driven by the need for approval. It is a conscious choice. And that is a powerful place to operate from. You begin to see that choosing yourself is not about isolation. It is about alignment. It is about making decisions that are in harmony with your values, your goals, and your well-being. It is about recognizing that you cannot be everything for everyone, but you can be the best version of yourself for those who truly matter. And that includes you. You are part of the equation. You are not meant to be the person who is always last. You are not meant to be the one who constantly sacrifices without receiving. You are not meant to disappear in the name of kindness. You are meant to stand tall. You are meant to be whole. You are meant to live a life where your kindness and your self-respect walk together. Choosing yourself also means letting go of the fear of disappointing others, because there will always be people who expect more from you than you can give. There will always be moments where you have to choose between pleasing others and honoring yourself, and in those moments you must choose wisely, because every time you abandon yourself to avoid disappointing someone else, you send a message to your own mind that your needs are not important. And over time, that message shapes how you see yourself. But when you choose yourself, even when it is difficult, you send a different message. You are saying that you matter. You are saying that your voice matters. You are saying that your life is worth protecting. And that is how confidence is built. That is how self-respect grows. That is how you become someone who is not easily shaken. Kindness does not disappear when you choose yourself. It becomes stronger because now it is rooted in authenticity. It is no longer forced. It is no longer draining. It is no longer something that leaves you empty. Instead, it becomes something that enhances your life while still honoring others. And that is the kind of kindness that leaves a lasting impact. So choose yourself without guilt. Choose yourself without fear. Choose yourself without losing your compassion, because the world does not need a version of you that is broken and exiled. Instead, trying to be everything for everyone, the world needs a version of you that is strong, grounded, and whole. And when you reach that place, you will understand that choosing yourself was never about losing your kindness. It was about learning how to protect it so it can thrive without destroying you in the process. In the end, choosing yourself without losing your kindness becomes a quiet but powerful way of living that reshapes everything around you. You stop living in reaction to others and start living in alignment with your truth. You no longer bend yourself into shapes just to be accepted, because you understand that the right people will respect you for standing firm in who you are. Your kindness becomes stronger because it is no longer forced or driven by guilt. It comes from a place of balance, a place of peace, a place of self-respect. And that is where your real power begins. Because when you choose yourself, you are not turning away from others. You are turning toward the version of yourself that can give more meaningfully, more authentically, and more sustainably. You learn to protect your energy. You learn to guard your peace. You learn to recognize when to step in and when to step back. And in doing so, you create a life that is no longer controlled by pressure or expectation, but guided by intention and awareness. You begin to move with clarity. You begin to speak with purpose. You begin to live with strength. And over time, people will not just see your kindness, they will respect your boundaries, your confidence, and the quiet strength that comes from a person who knows their worth and chooses to honor it every single day.